But someone asked me, and this is my friend from 2016. He asked me, because we caught up the other day, I haven't seen him in a couple of years. In a complimentary way, he didn't mean this in the bad way. Why did you change? How did you change? And how can I do it? And I was a bit surprised to hear that because we're on, I didn't know he kind of wanted to, whatever. But I'll answer the question on camera because I think maybe I said something half. I wish I had heard what I said to him when I was a kid. We're the same age, when I was going through it. I think identity is the biggest problem of Gen Z. And of course, I'm going to start with a historical reference. So just before the First Crusade, the laws over that previous 100 years in Western Europe changed. And they changed so that all of the inheritance of a king went to his firstborn male child. Which meant that the other boys, if they weren't trying to fight for the role of king, they had wealth, they had power, but they didn't have that level of power. So they actually grew up not in a state of anarchy. They weren't ridiculously poor. They had actually a level of comfort, which hadn't been seen for a couple hundred years. And when they heard a distant call from a East Roman emperor that they want help taking back the Holy Land, they saw that, and especially because it was doubled down upon by the Pope, they saw that as a crusade. And I say crusade not just in the context of that exact crusade, but also as like these Westerners, Western European people, especially Franks, Germans, Italians, I think some English, some Spanish, but mainly French. They were comfortable for a period. They had a generation of comfort, and they heard they had a calling, right? And I think, and obviously, they went and did the Crusades. Or at least the First Crusade, and then they stumbled back on the Greeks. Anyway, I think that's where we're at now. I think Gen Z in the West has grown up with a level of comfort that has made them aimless. Like after World War II and through the late 20th century, there wasn't really too much of a question of what do we do. You work and make money to survive. Like all of our immigrant parents. I mean, most people a good minority of people in America, in Canada, in the UK, in South Africa, in Australia, are immigrants, right? A good damn majority, maybe 40, 50%. And that have immigrated to these countries over the last 70 to 80 years, since after World War II. And there wasn't a question as to when you wake up, what do you do? You fucking work. You study so you can work and make more money. You're just aiming for stability. So that, shit like what happened back home didn't happen. Whether it was in Greece, where it was World War I, World War II, Balkan Wars, Civil War, military junta, famines, economic crises. That's just a Greek example. Like, everyone woke up and knew exactly what the fuck they wanted to do. They wanted to work and not be poor anymore. And for most of Gen Z, the kids of the baby boomers' kids, their kids, my generation, I'm 26. I feel like people I went to school with, that I grew up with, that I meet around the world, Gen Z, grew up not knowing what the fuck they were supposed to do. They're like, wait, I'm not poor, so why would I work so fucking hard and make so many sacrifices to make money when it has a very limited change of my lifestyle? Things are good. Now, to be honest, I never felt that way. I didn't grow up with money, and especially when I left home at 17, I knew exactly what I needed to do: stop being poor. And I think that is what always drove me to try and achieve shit faster in my life. Now, that being said, I think identity ties into this, because when you don't know what you're doing and what you're here for, what the meaning behind what your everyday is, you need to form some sort. That's your identity. My identity, obviously, is being an entrepreneur above most things, and obviously that's based around money. But most people in the West, in Gen Z, don't have that, right? They haven't needed to struggle, needed to really work so hard in their young years. And I think that's why Gen Z is having an identity crisis like we haven't seen in generations. They don't know what the fuck they're here for. And that's why you see them, like, I think I saw this one video, it's like, a cabin in the woods isn't the solution, and that, it's crazy because I've thought about a cabin in the woods a million times. Cabin woods isn't the solution. Like, Gen Z, every generation wants to be against the current culture. So if the previous culture was, you shouldn't be, putting men down. You shouldn't be masculine, you shouldn't be aggressive, or you shouldn't, stand your ground, or, being a man isn't, the coolest thing, we don't need men, then you're going to be anti that. Like, my generation of men is anti being soft to reality, because that we were told to be soft, right? So, it's just like that's why the manosphere is the way it is now. And with all that being said, on a personal level, on an individual level, I never really had that problem, right? I always knew what I was here for. I like to build stuff, I like to create. And when I was a kid, that was businesses, and now it's still businesses, and now it's actually content too. Sometimes it's comedy as well. I like to build stuff like that, a portfolio. Like, building a portfolio for me of work is what I enjoy. But when I think I had 2 or 3 times in my life where I said, I don't like the person who I am. I want to change to something else. I think one, when I was 17 years old, and I left home, and I, said, I don't want to, go to university. I don't want to get a job in mining engineering or finance. I want to be an entrepreneur. That was like, I was brought up a certain way, in a certain culture, in a certain community, to be a certain thing. And I just didn't want to do that. So I made a conscious decision to change that. And I suffered the consequences for a couple of years. And then, I morphed into this like young entrepreneur, maybe wannabe. But I had a few successes that kind of gave me an identity. Those young years in 2016, 17, 18 in Sydney, I was like, I'm a hustler on the side. Just on e-com businesses and, agency stuff. And it's hard to go from that to a legitimate entrepreneur, even in my own eyes, right? So, and to be honest, I did go out a lot. I just partied a lot. And I just woke up late every day, and I, did a half-assed job in the gym. And I just tried and didn't find any real entrepreneurial success in my own eyes. And so when a crisis came, which was, again, being broke, I made a decision, again, to look at myself in the mirror and say, I'm not happy with who I am, my identity right now, and I want that to change. And when I got a job, and then I quit, and then, they fired me, I said, okay, it's time to change. I think that takes a lot of... That takes, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm not half a narcissistic guy. And on with their own podcast is an asshole. But you do need to have a level of self-awareness to say, whatever the fuck I'm doing now ain't working, dog. That ain't it, dog. And that's what I said, again, for the second time. I was like, I don't like living in Australia. To be fair, I didn't even really like being Australian. I didn't like my little hustler identity of just, making ends meet and having to go back to, doing small jobs. Like, that just didn't work for me. And so I just packed my bag, sold my shit, and left. And I'm a big fan of drastic change when it's needed. And that's when I went to Europe in 2018, March 1st. And started a vlog, started a video, which was the start of, whatever this content thing is. I just started documenting my journey. And then I just started traveling through Europe. And it's crazy because that's exactly, it started as someone who just travels through countries and meets people, has fun, has good, fun relationships. And then, that identity from March 1st, 2018 pretty much stayed on in some way or another until 2022, end of 2020, or end of 2021. And, that identity worked for me. I was making more money. My businesses were doing well, were doing better. And I was a little bit healthier. My relationships were a little bit better. But to be frank, I still had a lot of mental turmoil from my childhood and stuff. And even those years in Australia where I was hustling pretty hard, that I hadn't dealt with. So, like, it felt like I was in a car that was faulty. And wherever I went, drove past, I could barely enjoy it because I was so worried about the car breaking down. Man, that was a good metaphor. Because that's really how I felt. Like, I really, between March 18 and end of 2021, really 2022, start 2022, those 4 years, I scraped through life, man, mentally and financially. Like, I was really, and it's funny because I'm going through my Instagram because I always use it as a timeline as to where I was when. It really looks like I had a good time. I really had a bad time. And anyone who knows me, the 5 people who I talk to on a regular basis, knows that, these years were turmoil for me. I remember calling up my mentors and just being like, things are bad and they're only getting worse and I'm depressed and I need help. I never said it like that. And, that's men's mental health for you, at least in my generation. But I never wanted to put on, to show how bad things were, even though I did document the process, like I said. I think I saw, and especially when you have in 2020 and 2021, when I got the Forbes thing, it's like, oh, here's the world telling you what you're doing is right, so keep on going. And then 2021, I burnt out really, really hard. Like, that format of that operating system of life of basically, I didn't realize this until now, but dopamine through lifestyle. Dopamine hits through lifestyle really didn't work as an operating system. For me, it doesn't really operate for anyone, I don't think. Maybe for other people. But, like, I got to the point where in 2021, I just created this new innovative thing in my business that was working well, but it needed a few tweaks. And I had gotten robbed 3 times. I was broke every other fucking month. I'd run a marathon though, and society tells you that's the massive achievement. I was living in New York, in Rome, in Barcelona, and things looked good. I started a comedy career, and I think it was there in Barcelona where I got robbed again for the second time of 3 in 2021. I'm just like, what am I doing wrong? I'm deathly unhappy. I'm this entrepreneur running around the world. I'm healthy, I get to travel and build a finance business at the same time. I'm having my cake and eating it too, Why am I so unhappy? It's like, I had to tell myself, look at myself in the mirror and say, I'm not happy with my identity. this needs to change. And I think that's really the moment that drives every motivational, what do they call it, glow up. Like you look, I've read Goggins' book a million times, but it's like he looked at himself in the mirror. He's like, no, I don't like who I am, and I want this to change. And then I gave up on the travel for a minute. For a couple of months, I stayed in Cyprus and just recouped mentally. And I said, for 2022, I'm not going to, because my routine was 90 days in a new city every 90 days, from basically 2018 to 2022. And I said they need to change. I just said, how about we just slow it down and do in 2022 mainly stay in Greece and Cyprus. And I still did a couple trips around the Mediterranean, but nothing big and stupid, which was wise. And that was a year that I didn't make any. To be honest, I'm not really too proud. I'm not proud. I'm proud, but there was no big business achievements that I did in 2022. It was a year of recovery. It was a year of tactical retreat. And it was the year that I got my shit together. For someone who is very competitive with themselves and every past year, I want to top every year that goes by. But in 2022, I said, dude, just get healthy, get your mind right, and slowly build your business back up. And 2022, that's what I did. And luckily, in 2023, I had a huge year for my business. I did a bunch of travel. I did a bunch of different physical stuff like Spartan races, marathons, swims, all this stuff. And that really continued in 2024. Like 2024, obviously, I did a bunch of shit. Guinness World Record, Ironman, sold an even bigger business in Q1, and then continued, and everything went really, really well. But to be honest, on the surface, again, for the fourth time, I think it was up to the fourth time, I had to say to myself, I'm deeply unhappy. The way things are, and the identity I have right now is not working. It's an improvement. It's getting closer. It's getting closer to the direction I want to go, but it isn't really exactly where and what I want to be. And luckily, my ego wasn't too big at that point for me to not listen to that. And sometimes it's, what do you do once you realize you're not happy? I think that's a good question. And I wish I could listen to myself. I'm going to watch this when I have to do all this again. I remember when I was in Bali, and, they call it a ego death. I think that's maybe a good characterization of what I'm talking about here. I think that I was in Bali, I was there for a recruiting job, and I was terrible at it. And I thought I was so depressed and angry at the world, the way that things in my childhood had went and ended up, and how I left the country and no one gave a shit, that I thought I was better than everyone, but I thought I was a piece of shit. And which sucks, because I'm a very extroverted person and I love people. But my self-esteem was so low that I was angry at everyone else for the way the way the things were going. And I remember when I was in Barcelona, another ego death at the end of 2021 I remember thinking, it's me against the world, like Tupac. But when he came out of prison, when he was Machiavelli, right? And it makes you evil when you think like that, like Machiavelli. And it's so not me. And I remember, someone said, I was in the comedy scene there in Barcelona. Someone said, my friend met you, he came through, but felt like he didn't like you. And I hate that, because usually I'm a nice guy. And I hated that this person thought that I was like that, but I knew the mood I was in, and I was just not in the affable, gregarious mood that I usually am. And I'm like, that just ain't me, But just the most recent, ego death I had was at the start of this year. 26, fourth ego death. It wasn't as big as the other ones, but I said to myself, I finished this March Cross Greece, this one, at the end of 2024, December 3rd, 2024. And I was in great shape. I was in the best shape I've ever been in my adult life. 77 kilos, shredded to the gills. My legs were broken, however. My immune system was zilch. A light breeze could have blown me over. I had more money than I've ever had. And I, in the previous 6 months, built out this content kind of process that had been getting views, and things were going well on the surface and internally. I felt like mentally, not so much. And I had to say to myself, something's got to change, dog. What the fuck? And at the same time, like I mentioned, between 2023 and 4, I still traveled. I didn't travel as much as previous years, as fast, but I still traveled. Barcelona, did maybe 5 to 15 countries every year, shorter trips, but like I still ran around a bit. And it's funny that what my job is to help people buy and sell businesses, because I talk to so many sellers and I hear their journeys. And I hear buyers and I hear sellers post-exit. What do they do with the money? And it's funny to hear young people like me, young men like me, entrepreneurs like me, spend the money within a few years and not on property. And I know so many young, rich male entrepreneurs who don't even have their own house. And to me, I always said, man, like, I don't get it, And that's why I said, in January this year, I thought I was going to have another year like last year, and like in 2023. I mean, it'd been going well, right? I'm making good money. Content's going well. I'm fucking healthy. I'm getting Guinness World Records. Like, who's to say this isn't a good thing? But my theory on this, to conclude, is imagine this. Imagine a graph. And across the bottom is time, and across the top is enjoyment and achievement, maybe. Or maybe just enjoyment. I think it's a bell curve, right? You get into a phase of your life, and at the start, it's hard to get into, a new environment, a new city, a new job, a new career, whatever it is. You get into this phase, and it's hard. The enjoyment isn't as great at the start. But then you get, you find the local clubs, the local bars, you find local communities, local friends, the local football team, girlfriend. You start to get good at your job, and things go well for you, and you're at that peak enjoyment. But at some point, that may dip off. And the same goes for the lifetime of a business. There's a bell curve to it. And maybe that it's not a perfect bell. Maybe it's more, the peak of that bell is towards the other side, or the start or the end. But I always believe in leaving the party a little bit early, even on a night out. I see it as a bell curve a lot of the time. Nothing great happens after 3 a.m., generally speaking, in my opinion. So I'll leave the party early, get some sleep, wake up tomorrow and go for a run. And I believe in leaving. There's this quote, I'm never going to, actually I'll probably find it. It's on my Instagram somewhere. About leaving, there's this quote that says, like, you should leave certain parts of your life leave parts of your life with a certain type of ruthlessness. And I really believe that, because, like, how many people do you know that are just stuck in the same lifestyle, and you're like, dude, you gotta stop going to the club. You're 74. Just like the old guy in the club. No one wants to be the old guy in the club. I'm never going to find it. No one wants to be the old guy at the club. That's what I'm talking about. You have to change up your identity at some point. Or maybe it's not a change. Maybe it's not maybe it's just a small renovation. And to that point, I jumped off the digital nomad lifestyle at the start of this year. And I started the year, January 1st, I was like, I'm going to have a sick year, same as last year. I started the year, and then within 2 weeks, I'm like, no, this has to change. I'm deeply unhappy. And something has got to change. And so I bought a house in Athens. I said I'm going to live in Greece permanently for a time. I'm not going to travel as much. I'd rather just explore my own country for a minute and, build a bit of a base. but more of my operations. And after a bit of therapy and a bit more work on myself, by myself, I realized this was the best decision ever. It's April now. We're coming up to May, and after Q1 this year, I'm like, I'm mentally stronger and in a better position than I've been in maybe ever. And that's not necessarily because I've been changing up my lifestyle because my lifestyle looks better on paper for the last 4 months. It's because I've done the work personally. And I write in a diary every day, and I talk pretty freely with friends and stuff. Like, start of March was definitely super stressful, and I was super sick. I've had a really bad stomach for a time because my immune system was shot. But like, I realized yesterday, Easter, looking at the fireworks across the city, I'm like, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to be in Greece, my country, have my own place at 26. Not to mention where I've come from, which is nothing, not nothing, negative 500 aura points. But like, I'm so lucky, and I have this, I think like, how did I get so lucky, And I think the only thing, I don't think I'm necessarily too much smarter than anybody. I am good at taking action. And maybe that's it, if I see something's not working, I'll just stop doing that. The third time. Like, I'll eat, I'm lactose intolerant. It took me years to stop eating milk and shit. I suffer the consequence. But, I think a lot of changing up your identity and making your life better is admitting what you're currently doing ain't working and stopping it, That's the thing. Like, I've been thinking about this thing. I don't know where I heard or where I read it. But it's like, everyone's always talking about investing in your future. Self-development is always about what can you do actively, what can you do on top proactively to get ahead. No one's talking about what you can stop doing to get ahead. What about an investment in not doing? For example, I smoke. I smoked occasionally. Last year, pretty much since end of 2020, I didn't smoke for like 2-3 years. I never smoked in 2019. I lived in Bali. Then I smoked there. Then I stopped 30th of August, and then I never smoked until the end of 2020. And then it was pretty like casual drinking, smoking. What do you call it? Casual smoking. And then on and off, torturing myself, trying to quit every other week. Ever since. And then even on the march across Greece, this is how dumb I am. Even on the march across Greece, I was smoking. I'm trying to do some physical ultra athlete achievement. I was smoking. It's because I was sad, man. Of course, we never showed it on camera. I told Gail to specifically not show the smokes, the cigarettes, even though I sometimes film myself doing it. I smoke a pack of cigarettes. Like, it's not so much the damage to my health that I was concerned about. It's just like every act of smoking is a mini suicide. It's like, I hate myself so much I'm doing this, and the scientific, I think, not that I'm a scientist, believe it or not, the scientific side of lifestyle changes, I think, when you're a kid to when you're an adult, is there's just less dopamine hits. And that's how it's supposed to be. There's less, and it's less frequent. When you're a kid, you're chasing, not to mention the fucking internet, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Tinder, smokes, vapes, zins, alcohol, fucking partying. It's insane, Like, I know friends, especially young male entrepreneurs are the guinea pigs of dopamine saturation. When you give young, uneducated, to be fair, and I'm uneducated too, young, uneducated men hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit in a tax haven, And the freedom of a US or Australian passport, dude, you're building a monster. And I have friends, that are very successful financially, my age and younger, and they're just chasing dopamine. And I love them. I fucking love them. They're my friends, but I was like that too. Not even to the extent that they were, but I'm physically ill from chasing all that dopamine, and I think at some point you have to say, maybe a bit less dopamine. Maybe I don't need a cigarette, a zin, a vape, TikTok all day and fucking all this. Like, maybe I need to just chill out a bit. Maybe I should, pre-workouts, Red Bulls, not to mention the caffeine consumption that I had and that my friends have. Like, for me, what I seek now is peace. Because what hourly dopamine hits is not peace, right? Peace is, I would say, an absence of dopamine, but it feels right. Like going through the Peloponnese for 4 days with a friend camping. I didn't smoke. I had 1 coffee a day. Didn't eat bad foods. Didn't spend much money even. And it felt right, Buying a house in Greece is a fucking process, and it's not a drip feed of dopamine every 5 seconds. It's like this. Finally, I did something, that I built. I can, experience it, So yeah, that's a long way of answering my friend's question and kind of what I said to him. Like, things aren't going. If you aren't the person you want to be, start just writing it out in your diary every single day. What does that person look like? What does that dream look like? One thing I always did, I still do, is I dreamt without constraint. And no one could constrain me. Like, literally, people tried. I would dream whatever. Like, I'm sitting here on this podcast the last 9 months saying GM for PM, George Moulos for Prime Minister in Greece, EU Parliament, Mayor of Monevasia. Like, I know how insane that is. But I just don't understand why it's not possible. I just don't get it. I don't understand why I couldn't work my ass off to learn Greek, make good enough content, have a clear enough message, build enough of a great team to do any of those things. I just don't understand. And maybe that's delusion. And maybe delusion like that only works in internet entrepreneurship. Maybe. I don't know. But I think the other people who are uber successful, when I see them, I'm like, you gotta be fucking delusional to start that process, right? I think you gotta dream, dude. You just gotta... Dreaming is free. That's what I always say. The university talks about now. Like, dreaming is free. I understand doing is hard, and it can be expensive and painful, but dreaming is free, man. Dreaming doesn't cost a dime. It doesn't cost any calories. It's free. Dreaming is fucking free. And every time before I go to bed, especially in those hard times I've had, I just dream about the life I want to have in 6 to 12 months. And now that's what I'm doing now. I had this, not ego death, I don't think it was as brutal as that, but I had to change my identity at the start of this year. And I bought this apartment. I've settled my life down a bit more. I'm putting in new operations. I'm changing my lifestyle. I'm changing the way I eat. I'm changing the way I drink. I'm changing the way I smoke. I don't smoke anymore. I'm changing the way I work. I'm changing the way I exercise. I'm changing pretty much everything in my life. At least 20 to 30, 40%. Things have changed for me. And that's because the road I was on was not the one I wanted to be on in 5 to 10 years. And I had, like I said, with that metaphor about being in a faulty car, I had to improve the car that I was riding, which is my body, my brain. But yeah, there's hope. There's hope that you can change, because if I could change all those times when I should have, I can't say it on YouTube, but like given up. And when a lot of people wanted me to, and not privately, they've said it publicly, scroll through my posts and shit, people really didn't like. People don't like me generally. A lot of the time, but there's hope, And funnily enough, the times when I had no hope in myself, it was my friends and my mentors and family, or two family members, who reminded me who the fuck I was. Mainly my friends, to be honest. So yeah, that's how I think you change your lifestyle for the better.